You carry a force that refuses to be reduced, even when pressure tries to fold you into silence. Every attempt to frame your undoing has only revealed something more uncontainable, something that doesn't break but instead expands. What was meant to capture your collapse has instead revealed your rise, undeniable and irreversible, like a truth breaking through even the thickest fog. The gaze that was fixed on you wasn't prepared for what it would witness. The watchers expected fragility, but what unfolded was an ignition of strength they couldn't predict. The more they studied, the more their own shadows trembled in the light you cast, unable to disguise themselves any longer. Those recordings, once imagined as proof of an ending, have transformed into living records of a beginning. They are not relics of defeat, but monuments of defiance, testaments to the moment when endurance became transformation. What was supposed to shrink, you only widened the horizon around you. Your essence reshapes the very stage where others thought you would stumble. Instead of being swallowed by the weight pressed upon you, you carved pathways where none existed. The forces meant to restrain became tools you bent into bridges, lifting you higher with every step they tried to block. The obsession with watching is no accident. It is born from the discomfort of witnessing someone refusing to fit into the narrative written for them. You became the mirror that reflected hidden fears, the light that exposed what others buried, the reminder that no mask of power can stand against the raw electricity of transformation. To those who doubted, your existence has become proof that rising is not just survival. It is art, rebellion, and revelation. Their expectations dissolved, and what remained was awe, the kind that unsettles because it rewrites what is possible. And so the watching continues, not because they wait for you to fall, but because they cannot look away from the spectacle of what you have become. You are not the subject of surveillance anymore. You are the phenomenon reshaping the lens itself, turning scrutiny into spotlight, and spotlight into proof of destiny. Strength is not only displayed in the open, it thrives in the shadows where others assume weakness resides. What unsettles onlookers is not that you endure difficulty, but how you bend it into brilliance without seeking validation or applause. Every fragment that could have been defeat becomes a luminous thread woven into something even greater. The observers prepared themselves for evidence of collapse, assuming hidden corners would expose fragility. Instead, they were confronted with revelations that overturned their own assumptions. What they captured was not a stage performance of composure, but an authentic surge of inner command that unsettled everything they thought they knew. The walls around you did not become prisons. They evolved into engines of creation. Spaces once imagined ordinary were revealed as arenas of elevation. In places where silence reigned, you stirred vibrations of renewal. Rooms assumed to conceal frailty instead became altars where courage was refined and certainty was reborn. Every angle of scrutiny unveiled a refusal to bow to artificial boundaries. No framework could explain the way you stepped beyond expectations without hesitation. Systems meant to contain power crumbled in the presence of your refusal to acknowledge limits as real. The recordings became less about surveillance and more about lessons in defiance. Those who placed their faith in control trembled at the implications. The vision of someone stepping beyond what could be confined unsettled entire structures of belief. The possibility that strength emerges from the unseen, untouched by imposed hierarchies, rattled the foundations of those invested in the illusion of dominance. What unsettled them most was not the image projected outward, but the consistency of the unseen moments. When left alone, your essence did not diminish, it magnified. Private acts of devotion carried weight that rivaled thunder, and small gestures of persistence reverberated louder than staged declarations. They discovered, unwillingly, that your inner rituals spoke a language beyond their grasp. Movements, choices, and moments stitched together in armor no manual could replicate. What was meant to expose became proof of invulnerability, and what was meant to reveal weakness instead carved an image of someone untouchable, an individual who writes their own laws within the quiet of their own dwelling. What unsettles the world is not that you exist, but that you refused to collapse into the roles scripted for you. The very proof of your endurance plays out where fragility was expected. Instead of providing the evidence they longed for, you became the unexpected response to unspoken questions, an undeniable reminder that their versions of reality are incomplete. Attention clings to you without permission, as if pulled by a force that cannot be denied. Those who swore you would disappear are forced to watch, unable to look away from the very presence that invalidates their predictions. Every time you overcome what was meant to dismantle you, hurried attempts are made to analyze, yet none of them manage to decode your essence. Their fixation is not admiration dressed as curiosity. It is unease wrapped in fascination. What disturbs them most is how you continue to multiply in strength with each attempt to confine you. They convince themselves that dissecting your life will lessen their own sense of inadequacy, yet the recordings only mirror back the void they fear to face within themselves. The hope was that eventually, your path would serve as proof of limitation, but each captured moment revealed something they dreaded instead. You live as contradiction to their rules, untouched by manipulations, beyond their capacity to explain. That reality gnaws at their sense of superiority, forcing them to confront truths they never wanted acknowledged. What was meant to be archives of failure transformed into evidence of evolution. Their understanding faltered because they were not watching a figure who could be undone like countless others before. They were observing someone who operated outside their frameworks, someone who would not bend, no matter the schemes layered against them. Their devices became unwitting stage lights, illuminating the evolution they swore would never happen. You did not shrink away from being observed. You turned their monitoring into fuel. Every attempt to box you in sharpened instincts they didn't realize you possessed, and every strike meant to wound only became raw material for greater resilience. So focused were they on plotting your collapse that they overlooked the artistry unfolding in front of them. What unsettled them most was the realization that you were aware of their watchfulness all along, and instead of retreating, you turned the invasion into a tool. In speaking to unseen eyes, you transformed surveillance into testimony, and what they thought was control became documentation of inevitability. Power unsettles most when it refuses to be hidden, and you carried that power openly even when watched in secret. The very attempts to record your undoing became chronicles of someone declaring their own becoming. Every gaze fixed on you in hope of finding collapse instead preserved the proof of emergence that could never be erased. What unfolded was not compliance with the roles designed for you, but the unshakable defiance of someone unwilling to bend to orchestrated scripts. In place of surrender, they witnessed a stance so resolute that every false narrative dissolved instantly. What was expected to be evidence of weakness became an eternal record of refusal. Ordinary walls became stages of transformation, each corner echoing a different form of growth. In moments of solitude, strategies sharper than any institution could conceive were born. Meditative silence carried answers unavailable to any doctrine, and even small celebrations pulsed with currents powerful enough to shift unseen forces. Instead of despair, what filled those recordings were daily acts of reclamation. Attempts to document emptiness only captured overflowing strength. Where observers anticipated exhaustion, they found commitment building layer by layer, until even the repetition of affirmations carried an unstoppable momentum. What emerged from that surveillance was not the fragile portrait they desired, but the visible shaping of resilience into form. Their vision of control collapsed when confronted with transformation happening at levels they could neither predict nor interrupt. The very blueprint of destruction turned into testimony of an unbreakable will. Every betrayal designed as sabotage became unintended scaffolding for something greater. Malice was converted into material for expansion, and every calculated strike only fueled deeper resolve. What was meant to silence became the echo chamber for a voice that refused erasure. Their certainty about power's direction was dismantled in full view. Even as traps were layered with precision, the expected downfall never came. Barriers rose, but each was crossed. Conspiracies multiplied, but none held their weight. Those waiting for inevitable cracks were left with nothing but the realization that their confidence had written them into the story as supporting characters of their own failure, while your rise stood as the only lasting headline. Strength that refuses to vanish unsettles those who never believed it could exist. What they captured was not collapse, but the revelation of a core beyond destruction. You were never simply enduring pressure. You were using it as raw material to expand into forms no framework of human study could anticipate. The plan was to expose fragility, yet what unfolded was the unmistakable rhythm of someone thriving. The recorders filled with scenes not of disarray, but of force accumulating quietly, swelling into something they could not quantify. Every attempt to fracture you only concentrated your resolve, shaping it into endurance beyond imitation. What looked like chaos to them became the workshop where your essence was refined until it carried a permanence no opposition could dissolve. Their designs failed because your foundation was not borrowed from outside approval. It was something sourced from within, untouchable by betrayal or manipulation. They witnessed depth they could not enter, strength they could not steal, certainty they could not decode. The more they watched, the less they understood, until your very existence became the paradox they could not solve. What none of them anticipated was how roles would reverse. The observed became the examiner, the studied became the instructor. In the silence of your own dwelling, intentions were set, dialogues with your higher self unfolded, and strategies beyond comprehension were crafted. What was supposed to document despair instead revealed the architecture of purpose taking shape. Their seeds of sabotage did not yield weakness. They sprouted into expansion, none of them planned for. Out of hostility grew an ecosystem of resilience, vast enough to eclipse the narrowness of their schemes. Instead of seeing ruins, they saw pillars rise, built from the very materials they had designed for harm. Devices chronicled phenomena no one could account for, changes in energy, shifts in atmosphere, the undeniable influence of a mind harmonizing with its own environment. Technology picked up signals that textbooks could not explain, and space itself seemed to cooperate with the vision you carried. Even the most skeptical began questioning whether what they were witnessing belonged to science or something beyond its reach. And what began as invasive monitoring ended as a library of inspiration. Those private scenes revealed strength more commanding than speeches, clarity more profound than lectures, and practices that generated power impossible to counterfeit. Every frame meant for blackmail became testimony. Every second meant for ruin became memorial. And in the end, the watchers documented the very greatness they had set out to erase. Greatness unsettles because it cannot be contained, and every step you took inside your own walls became a declaration that ordinary space had been transformed into sacred ground. Movement that was meant to be tracked for evidence of decline instead became proof of a rise no plan could obstruct. What was installed to monitor failure recorded the collapse of control in those who believed they held it. Instead of capturing fragility, the recordings revealed an atmosphere thick with unease. The very eyes searching for flaws exposed themselves as bitterness and envy bled through the footage more clearly than any intended weakness. What they hoped would humiliate only magnified their own shadows, displayed in plain sight through the contrast of your light. Attempts to unravel you only shredded their own designs. The harder they tried to bind you with observation, the quicker their fabric of illusions tore apart. Each record pressed revealed not your decline, but the thin threads holding their deceptions together. The images became windows reflecting emptiness back at the watchers, who could not stand what they saw within themselves. Every scheme failed because the truth does not need to battle. It only needs to exist. Your radiance made pretense transparent. It stripped away performance, exposing insecurity beneath facades and hesitation behind threats. Their power was never undone by resistance, but by exposure. A light that showed what was always there, but carefully hidden. Instead of weakening you, the act of surveillance unraveled their own sense of power. Screens replayed not your downfall but their frustration, not your collapse but their stagnation. In time, The cameras became proof of their own inability to change the outcome, transforming from weapons into reminders of futility. Those recordings turned into mirrors, showing them the poisons they had carried within, the resentment that clouded judgment, the jealousy that eroded peace, the bitterness that rotted ambition. Your growth reflected everything they refused to face. They mistook your transformation as a threat when it was an invitation, and the choice to deny it became their cage. What was meant to be evidence of your ruin now exists as archives of contrast. Each moment captured inside your home is a study in what happens when one rises and others remain stuck. What they recorded as failure materialized into their own reflection of inadequacy. While your ascent became the undeniable lesson they were never ready to learn. What unsettled the watchers most was not what they recorded, but what they could never decode. How presence under scrutiny sharpened your authenticity instead of diluting it. Observation was supposed to make you shrink, but it only made you expand. Growth didn't pause under the gaze of hidden lenses. It accelerated, turning constant exposure into fuel. Those hidden devices became unwilling producers of a narrative they never intended to release. What emerged was a chronicle of strength refusing to dim itself, a living documentary of someone unapologetically inhabiting their own magnitude. Every frame dripped with the quiet panic of those who realized too late that control had already slipped from their grasp. What was caught on tape didn't diminish you, it haunted them. Proof unfolded that nothing could derail what was already set in motion. The walls they thought would contain you reverberated with a signal of triumph that disrupted even the machines used to monitor you. Their own equipment betrayed them, amplifying the very success they wanted to suppress. Reports from technicians spoke of strange anomalies, images sharper than the lenses should have captured, sound-carrying tones unaccounted for by the hardware. Your presence upgraded the technology itself, bending systems into witnesses of advancement instead of conspirators of sabotage. Their tools were documenting more than sight and sound. They were recording evidence of a reality operating on rules they couldn't master. Every instrument of intrusion backfired spectacularly. Microphones picked up not collapse, but gratitude whispered into the air. Sensors tracked not hesitation, but the steady rhythm of discipline weaving invincibility step by step. Cameras didn't catch cracks. They mapped the emergence of someone building strength in ways no textbook could predict. The footage baffled experts because it refused classification. Attempts to label it as ordinary psychology fell apart. Instead of decline, it revealed a pattern of evolution so far beyond their categories that new terms would have to be invented to describe it. What was installed as surveillance became an archive of human expansion into realms that had never been charted. Within your home, the ordinary became laboratories of discovery. Each space was transformed into a chamber of practice, where obstacles dissolved into lessons and pressure became propulsion. What they thought would be a record of resignation became the undeniable evidence of someone not just surviving attack, but thriving through it, rewriting every assumption about limitation in the process. What confounded them most was the realization that opposition never weakened you. It refined you. Every attempt to undermine your path only added to your clarity, sharpening your will like steel against stone. The performances they believed would reveal fragility instead revealed mastery, and each scene became undeniable evidence that you were never pretending. You were demonstrating. Instead of collapsing under their gaze, you transformed their monitoring into a stage that showcased transformation in motion. The narrative they tried to script was overwritten by your choices, each moment becoming an episode of elevation. Their hunger for proof of weakness was answered only with footage of breakthrough after breakthrough, a rhythm of growth they could not stop. The influence of your rise spread beyond the immediate circle of those tasked with watching. Stories circulated of strange dreams, flashes of insight, and inexplicable moments of clarity touching those who had come into even indirect contact with the recordings. What began as surveillance quietly became a broadcast of awakening that rippled outward, touching lives never meant to be involved. Even their systems betrayed them. Data archives seemed to operate with unusual efficiency, as if the very files holding your progress carried energy that altered the machinery. What was meant to be secret storage became a hidden current of renewal running through the veins of their infrastructure. The more they tried to contain your essence, the more it expanded into everything around it. Setbacks designed to exhaust you became catalysts that fueled your flame brighter. Every failed trap exposed the weakness of its architect, rather than yours. The cages built for you shattered, not because you forced them open, but because you had already grown beyond the size they were designed to contain. Footage meant to humiliate documented transcendence that left no trace of defeat behind. From every wound you carved strategies. From every scar you shaped blueprints for greater heights. Their expectation of collapse turned into recorded testimony of an individual dismantling obstacles with deliberate precision. Where others saw confinement, you found opportunity. Where others plotted endings, you discovered beginnings they could never predict. The cameras became monuments to resilience, proof etched in digital permanence that your story could not be controlled by anyone else. Success became your rebuttal to betrayal. Detachment became your shield against manipulation. And resilience became the crown you placed upon yourself. Untouchable, unshakable, and undeniable, no matter how many eyes tried to strip it away. What the watchers never anticipated was that their archives would become monuments, not evidence of collapse. Every review, every replay, every search for weakness only uncovered an indestructible thread of persistence running through your story. What was designed as a weapon of exposure transformed into testimony that no distortion could erase. Their nightmare wasn't the footage itself, but what it proved. That pressure strengthened some souls rather than shattering them. Instead of capturing decline, their devices created a manual of resilience, a living example for others to study, showing exactly what it looks like when someone refuses to dim in the face of hostile eyes. The invasion of your private life revealed the opposite of what they wanted. Instead of fragility, it displayed sovereignty. Your surroundings began echoing back the strength you carried, creating ripples that reached beyond walls and into lives nearby. Small changes in the environment signaled something happening that no measurement of control could contain. Neighbors reported unexplainable growth, prosperity appeared in unexpected corners, and even the rhythm of daily life shifted in ways science couldn't fully explain. Ordinary space became extraordinary, reshaped by your presence, until even those tasked with monitoring had to admit something unaccountable was unfolding. The illusions that once weighed on you fell away like chains that had never truly belonged. Freed from projections meant to drown you, you rose untethered, ascending above designs made to keep you small. Every step upward became proof that limitations imposed from outside lose their power once the inner core remembers its origin. For those who calculated your end with certainty, every victory you claimed became a wound to pride. Their equations failed because they tried to measure you with the wrong variables. What they faced was not a person defined by limits, but a force that refused to fit into any framework of prediction. Their mistake was assuming only the visible mattered. They ignored what moved silently in your favor. Unseen forces working with precision beyond human skill. Every curse dissolved before it reached you. Every barrier cleared before it touched your path. Hands from beyond time steadied your way, and prayers whispered across dimensions carried you through battles they never had the vision to perceive. What was thought to be sealed away forever became accessible the moment you chose to move forward without hesitation. Destiny was never a coin toss or a matter of circumstance. It was upheld by currents greater than any calculation of envy or schemes of small minds. Devices meant to secure evidence of collapse ended up locking away undeniable proof of ascension, preserved in ways no erasure can undo. When the verdict of your ending was announced, something primal awakened within you. It wasn't anger or desperation. It was the uncontainable surge of spirit announcing itself in tones no instrument could mute. The strength that rose could not be confined by wires, walls, or lenses. Surveillance turned into a stage where even silence thundered louder than any declaration of defeat. Your surroundings began to reflect your inner state in ways that unsettled the assumptions of those watching. Objects seemed to shift as though aligning themselves with your clarity. Illumination adjusted itself to meet your focus, not because of technology, but because the atmosphere itself bowed to intention. Even the smallest details revealed patterns, hinting at a deeper dialogue between thought and matter. The space around you evolved into more than shelter. It became a sanctuary where ideas leapt into form quicker than measurement could capture. What was logged by hidden machines was not ordinary movement, but the documentation of phenomena beyond academic reach. Home became a proving ground where the invisible translated into the tangible with ease. Guidance unseen by monitors moved through you with precision. Wisdom that survived generations coursed through choices and sharpened instincts. The inheritance you carried wasn't just memory. It was power encoded into your very being, moving through decisions like currents shaping entire landscapes. That force was never distant. It was alive within every step you took. Attempts to author your downfall were overwritten with authority greater than any plan devised against you. The handwriting of destiny inked its truth across your life, with clarity impossible to counterfeit. Consequences arrived not at your doorstep, but at those who attempted to trespass against you. The poisons prepared in secret vessels became the toxins that eroded their own peace. What emerged in the recordings was more than resistance. It was the undeniable rewriting of storylines that others assumed they controlled. The energy intended to corner, you became the same energy that dismantled false power. While they searched for evidence of fragility, what they uncovered was the irreversible reality that the path had already been written in strength they could neither understand nor alter. The very traps once crafted to restrict you became cages that confined their creators. Every attempt to sculpt your ruin only molded the pathway for your ascent. What was envisioned as an ending instead became a prelude to your unfolding. Each scheme collapsing under the weight of its own design, while your rise carved itself into permanence. Your strength is not measured by willpower alone, but by a shield no human hand can pierce. That protection is older than time, deeper than comprehension, and immune to corruption. What surveillance captured was not fragility, but evidence of a safeguard, so profound it demands reverence from those wise enough to notice. What they recorded was movement guided by forces no chart can map. Wisdom flowing from places beyond their reach, and empowerment anchored in a source that cannot be challenged. Attempts to halt you resembled futile efforts to stop dawn from arriving. The truth remains fixed. The eternal never loses, and neither do you. It soon became clear that your living space wasn't simply shelter. It was alive with your essence. Walls responded to your focus. Rooms resonated with your intent, and your very presence elevated the energy around you. Those recordings documented how consciousness can reshape environment, how your personal frequency influenced even those who only viewed the footage from afar. By accident, the most complete testimony of human capability ever compiled was created. What they thought would expose weakness instead revealed a blueprint of liberation. You were never just a target of schemes. You were the embodiment of a revolution rewriting every assumption about limits and possibility. No amount of monitoring could capture or contain the magnitude of what you carried. While others faltered in the shadows of self-doubt, you blazed pathways impossible to extinguish. The chaos they hurled became the very foundation of your elevation, and the crown they tried to deny you fit more perfectly with every strike they delivered. Obstacles became launch pads, ruins became kingdoms, and every setback only magnified your expansion. Your brilliance doesn't fade when challenged. It grows until it blinds those who stare too long in search of flaws that do not exist. This isn't just resilience, it is destiny unfolding, purpose ignited, and sovereignty remembered. Approval was never required because you were never ordinary. You are existence's chosen revelation.